Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown. Welcome to LA Currents. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Gilbert Gee from UCLA. He's in the Fielding School of Public Health with an actual expertise in environmental health studies and racism, which I think is utterly fascinating. What is racism? I mean, there's obviously what we know from a generic standpoint, from a general standpoint, but from a scientific standpoint and from a theoretical standpoint.
Yeah. At the heart of it, racism is really a system of power and relations. And when you think about racism being connected to white supremacy, in many ways the key word there is supremacy. For many generations, it's essentially a system of domination originating from slavery, as an example, where it's really about power and control, both economic and social and cultural control. And so we today are still part of the system of racism that was established many generations ago.
It is still prevalent, and it actually has a physical manifestation on people who are the victims of racism.
Unfortunately, COVID-19 is a good example of the resurfacing of prejudicial attitudes and discriminatory behaviors. And you're right.
Every disease has ever came from China, homie. Everything comes from China. It's disgusting. Chinese people are cool, but their hygiene, they have no hygiene. So I'm bringing this and I'm bringing everything that they bring to our country.
The stress from discrimination leads to something called allostatic load, which is essentially wear and tear on our bodies from chronic stress. And that in turn affects other systems in our body, like the immune system, the brain, and all these other things. And that's part of the reason why we see a diversity of health problems related to experiencing discrimination.
The Asian community, I remember very clearly thinking how sad it was when there were conversations with man on the street interviews about, I'm feeling insecure, I'm feeling as if I'm being threatened, I'm feeling unsafe.
So words matter. Whether we say China virus versus COVID-19 really does appear to matter. So, in 2015, the World Health Organization issued a document saying that we no longer want to associate diseases with places, people, or even animals. I've actually been doing some research with some computer scientists. We did some analysis of Twitter and of tweets looking at whether the words, the phrase China virus had any different connotation compared to the phrase COVID-19. And what we found is, when tweets are associated with other hashtags, we found that there was essentially a 2.5 greater propensity to associate negative words to the phrase China virus compared to the phrase COVID-19.
I'm fascinated by even the modality of your research. How do you determine negative response in a tweet? What are some of the key words that you are looking for, or what is it that you're looking for that you can say, this is a negative tweet and this is a banal tweet?
Yeah, so you can essentially look, when people tweet something, they retweet it. Okay. Right, and so you might have hashtag something something and then add another hashtag to it, or hashtag something and then you add a sentence to it, sure, right, to give your opinion about it. And so negative tweets, would be using racial slurs like chink. So, hashtag China virus, hashtag chink would be like one way to do it. Another way would be to say, hashtag China virus, we should bomb China. And we've seen phrases like that. And so we would consider that kind of negative speech.
While we're now in the middle or the end or the wherever we are, because it changes minute by minute, as individuals, how can we be sensitive to these words, to these divides, to these concerns, so that we as people, people to people, make sure that we are not making things worse? Yeah,
I think there's a few things we can do. I think one, is first of all, just have a spirit of generosity. I think most people are nervous, afraid, and I think when that happens, we tend to first think about ourselves, and so that involves things like hoarding, like, I'm gonna just buy a bunch of face masks and just keep them at home. But think about being a little more generous with some of your basic supplies and and things of that nature. And I think a kind word goes a long way. I remember going to the supermarket soon after, LA announced social distancing matters, and they didn't start to implement all the policies in the supermarkets. I felt so bad for the grocery store workers because they're trying to stock things and try to, run the cash register, and people are just being mean to them. And that's unnecessary. I mean, these are people doing their job, and we need them to do their job, and we should be thankful rather than chew them out because the lines are long. So I think some kindness goes a long way. At the same time, as we think about the policies that we're going to entertain for the long term, we want to think about ourselves as a community. We want to think that what is the best policy response that we can have for, say, the city of LA as a whole, or for our state as a whole, or for the country as a whole, rather than what's really best for me or for my family or my specific community. I think once we have this shared vision and understanding that germs don't respect political boundaries or respect identities, that we might have a whole different viewpoint on how we want to think about mitigation and control going forward.
From your vantage point, is racism ramping or is racism abating? Please say abating.
I wish I could. I think we've had this underlying structure of racism that has never gone away. What happens, though, is that diseases give people opportunities to express their hidden prejudices.
Oh.
Yeah. And this is not the first time. I mean, with SARS, we saw discrimination against Asians as well. There was some evidence of discrimination against, African American people with the advent of Ebola.
I know that there is that issue of I need to blame somebody for something. I mean, you spoke about power in racism, but there's also the I need to make this someone else's responsibility in order to explain it to myself.
Yeah. So, we're living in turbulent times, and people want some sense of normalcy and control. It's a basic fundamental human need to have some control over their lives. And the problem is with something like this, where your world is turned topsy-turvy, there's not a lot of control. The one thing you can do that's comforting to some is to find scapegoats and victim blame. And so we start to blame other people. Yeah, it's not our fault. It's not because our public health infrastructure is underdeveloped and underfunded. It's because of these other people and their bad behaviors in this other government and all those kinds of things. And it's easy and comforting, and it gives us this feeling of illusionary control to do this victim blaming. And for some people, it's a way to vent their frustrations by committing a hate crime against another person, but at the end of the day, these are counterproductive. They don't actually solve the problems and the fundamental root causes of what we're facing.
Fascinating and sad and important subjects, and hopefully on the other side of this, it will not be as critical as it feels right now.
I agree 100%.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
Gee. We'll be right back.
And then how is it affecting this community more than others?
Come on, man. I think people of color are always affected more adversely. If you look throughout history, we've been getting the most out of anybody for over 400 years. So this is only for like 4 weeks. You feel me?
It's about the same, haven't changed.
It hasn't happened to me, and so I haven't really seen a lot of, racism or anything like that. I'm being treated well. Everywhere I go, I've been treated well. It's just been more stressful than anything.
It's not affecting me because the word is written. God is sending a message.
Trump is behind all of this. Him and his partners getting rich. We're the very last to be served in all areas of this whole deal. You have to look at it like that.
All of this will come together if we come together. We have to come together and do this together. Stop the violence, stop the stressing, stop the hoarding. It's going to be okay.
There's nothing nobody can do about it, so you may as well accept it. On your knees. On your knees.
Welcome back to LA Currents. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, founder of the Dr. Bryant Foundation and the Dr. Bryant Institute. It is so wonderful to have you here. There's so much going on in the mental health world in regards to this pandemic. How are we doing? How is it looking from your vantage point?
On the Black and brown community, it's really taken a toll because there are already a lot of underlying health issues and underlying mental health issues that have to do with trauma that was already there pre-pandemic. That was already something that they were not getting treatment for because of their lack of access to medical care, health care, which stems from our systemic, health care disparities that continues to stay on the back burner of the American health system. And because of those things, now that we enter a pandemic, you take the weight and the trauma that was already there prior to this and multiply that by 100 or sometimes 200 times, depending on the individual, the family, the community, and the neighborhood. This crisis is a crisis that we have been feeling and we have been experiencing when there was no COVID-19 pandemic crisis.
I was reading some statistics, and all of this will ultimately, vary, but how is Los Angeles doing in managing the information provided to minority communities through this whole thing? It seems from my vantage point, and believe me, that's a very loose term, that it's actually going well.
I have to agree with you. I do believe that our mayor is doing a wonderful job, and our governor, and even our city council, Joe Busciano, which I'm in CD 15, with making sure that the community is abreast on updates on what needs to be done, what is being done, and what we are trying to do. And the best ways and tips on how to protect yourself, how to protect your family, and those sorts of things, absolutely. One thing that I do believe that we need to improve on is testing. I believe that testing needs to be definitely provided to the communities, such as Black and brown, who do not, pre-pandemic and now, have access to health care. Why? Because African Americans are being attacked 2 times more by this pandemic than any other race, okay? And we only take up 9% of the Los Angeles County population, and we are 17% of the death rate, okay? Now, my thing is, if you already know that, and it was me, I'd be sending tests directly to where I know the highly affected communities are. Not only to protect and serve those communities as a human right, but also because I'm thinking if they are the most affected and this thing is spreading like wildflowers, we got to get to the most affected. That's the piece where it becomes a disparity. Because why is it that you are not setting up, and I'm not saying that our elected officials are not setting that up. That's not what I'm saying. I'm speaking on what I see can be a resolution or a part of a resolution. And what before this pandemic was not happening in the Black and brown communities. And we're seeing it now in the pandemic, still not happening. When you have a race of people who already are suffering from underlying health issues, and you know that their death rate is high, and you know that their contagiousness or them catching this is high, why would you not go in there as a human right and do something about that and concentrate testing in that area, 1. 2, we at the Dr. Bryant Foundation, we have hooked up with another organization where, because we know that in these communities, the minority communities, these individuals don't have access to masks. So they see it on their television, but they don't have access to masks. And in order for them to go get a mask, if they want to get one, if they don't have transportation, they're getting on a public transportation. That means that they're exposing themselves to other people, again.
To go get protection.
You get what I'm saying?
Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. And so even if they are a carrier of it and they're leaving the house, they're still exposing themselves to other people.
Sure.
And if they're not a carrier, it goes vice versa. They're leaving their house to risk their life, to go do something that is possibly supposed to save their life, okay? And so we have hooked up with an organization where in the next couple weeks, we are going to be doing a PPE drop-off. In these, in the African American and the brown community, where we have this big rig, we're gonna fill it up with PPE gear, with hand sanitizer, a mask, and gloves, and we're gonna just do a cute drop off on the front porch. And we're going to make sure that they know that the memo of when you come out your porch, grab your bag, you got your stuff. You don't have to leave the community to go out there and get it. Absolutely. I do believe that our healthcare providers, 100%, we're so grateful for them. They need the mask. But I also believe that the people in the community need those masks as well to be protected. In addition to that,
I was going to say, I know that you're doing more.
We are, yeah, absolutely. In addition to that, the Dr. Bryant Foundation and NAACP, we are providing $100,000 worth of grocery gift cards to the CD15 Harbor area community. We also, thanks to our really good friend Mike Lansing for the contribution, we also are providing 100 families with hot plates, not for one person, but for their entire household. And so we have set up things to do all that we can do within our capacity. Obviously, there's more that needs to be done. There's more that we want to do. And as we continue to partner with these different organizations, we're going to continue to go in these communities and do what we can to provide that type of protection for them. Because it is something that obviously at this point, sadly and unfortunately, but we have to take matters into our own hands as a Black community, as a brown community, and we have to get together and say, okay, what else needs to be done? Let's hit the floor running, boots to the ground. No more just complaining about it. No more just watching your TV screen and saying this is sad, but contact your local organization. If you want to even partner up with us, we would love to have you a part of our organization. You can go to NAACP1069@gmail.com.
Which you are the president of.
I'm the president of the NAACP for San Pedro Wilmington. You can also contact us at drbryantfoundation.org. We have a whole volunteer page where you just put your name in there and we will contact you. We do advise all seniors to make sure that they are not going to grocery stores, they are not going to pick up their medication. They are having someone else do that for them, contact a neighbor, and see if someone can go out and get that done for them so that we can protect our seniors as well that are in our community.
How are you protecting yourself? Because you're carrying a burden here of people's psyche and of people's health and of people's need, and it doesn't sound like you're sleeping. So how are you?
I see you understand.
How are you caring for you? Because you can't help others if you are not strong and healthy yourself.
100%. You sound like you've been to a Dr. Bryant workshop, because I always say we produce who we are. We only can give what we have, and it starts with self-love. A few things that are therapeutic for me. I have an evening run I do, Monday through Friday, sometimes Monday through Sunday. I read audiobooks. I watch positive YouTube videos. I stay connected. I have my Zoom meetings. I'm involved with that. I keep my schedule going. In addition to that, to further your question, no, I don't get much sleep, but it's not a burden on me to do this because true leadership is putting yourself on the front line, and putting yourself on the front line oftentimes risking your well-being, because that's what leadership does. Because leadership is getting out there and saying, listen, this is what I've signed up to do. This is in my DNA, and I'm going to do it regardless. Because that's my legacy, is to be able to come in and have an impact on community, to be able to give back to communities that I've came from. I'm a product of the inner city. I'm a product of the people that I'm helping right now. And so for me to go back and do that and be a leader of this community, it makes my heart smile, and it is my purpose, and it really is something that I believe all leaders have to understand when they take that oath, because there's not just an oath of medical doctors or an oath of being an attorney. Leadership is taking an oath, an unspoken oath that says that I am willing to give my all within my capacity that I can to change lives, even if it's one life in my lifetime. And when you sign up to do that, you put your head down and you just go. You take calculated risk, but you do make sure that you're showing up for yourself and for your people every day, whatever that means.
And you're a great example.
Thank
so that's
you.
a very important component of all of this too, because of what you do will be seen, and what is being seen will be reflected. And so congratulations.
And that's the hope.
Yes.
That's the hope.
Well, congratulations, Dr. Bryant. I mean, it's been really wonderful to talk with you, and I'm sure you'll get lots and lots and lots of support for all these great things that you're doing. So
I hope so.
congratulations.
Maybe we can get you out there with us.
Why not? Let's do
That'd be
it.
amazing.
All right.
Thank you so much for having
Be
me.
safe.
Great job.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Hello, I'm Maria Hall-Brown. I am here at the Emergency Operations Center for the City of Los Angeles, and I am delighted to be joined by the LA County Public Health Liaison, Carmina de Santiago. Lovely to have you here. What is a public health liaison?
So a public health liaison for the county to the city is somebody who communicates from the city to county and vice versa on a daily basis. Especially during this time, it's very important to have somebody who can communicate between the two and make sure that all of the needs are met from both sides, and to make sure that overall our public health is being handled, especially during an emergency.
So what is the information that needs to go back and forth to them? Obviously, tallies of people that have been diagnosed with COVID-19, unfortunate tallies of people who have passed. I mean, what other things need to be communicated?
So it could mean a variety of things, from something as small as hand sanitizer to something as large as a homeless shelter or a mobile testing site.
And I'm joined by someone who is no stranger to emergencies, Chris Ipson. He's here with the Emergency Management Department. You have been with a wide range of interesting incidents for a long period of time, have you not?
Yeah, it actually started with 1998, if anybody remembers those days. The Y2K jumped right into the Democratic National Convention, protests that we happened to have downtown, earthquakes, windstorms. So I've been through a lot. So we've activated this center, but never to this level, where we're found today at a level 1, the highest level in the center. And it's taken a lot of wear and tear. We've been here about a month now.
Right.
And so this is unprecedented times for not only the city, but for the entire country and the world.
I am joined by Daniela Pacro, who is in General Services, and I don't have a clue as to what that means.
So basically, General Services, we supply most of the departments within the city with all the commodities that they need. Anytime they need something, they come to us with a request, and we're able to get that to them.
Over the last month, you've said this is at level 1, and everybody has been, fully on alert and doing everything humanly possible. Is this something that you could have anticipated in your career seeing happen? Is this beyond anything you could have imagined? I mean, from a personal standpoint, obviously from a professional standpoint, you've got that handled, but just knowing what you know and being around what you've seen.
Well, actually, pandemics, we've talked about pandemics. We've done some tabletop exercises. And when we went ahead and we were doing the drills, it was very interesting. The responders were saying it could never get this bad. So that was kind of the mentality. We thought about it. Personally, we got impacts at the house, children doing online school. Your kid from college comes back home, those kinds of issues. It's a new world. The freeways, I'm still not used to the 35, 40-minute commute. That's normally an hour and a half for somebody that lives in Ventura County. So, it's a weird sense of, what's the new world going to look like is one of the things that I think about is, are people going to be allowed to telecommute more? So what are the things that come out of this? What's the new normal look like?
And have things kind of, I don't want to say calmed down, but I mean, has there become like a flow or routine that people have gotten more familiar with in order to be able to communicate across departments and communicate from city to county, et cetera?
Yes, actually, we didn't expect something to happen like this, so a lot of people weren't educated on this particular topic of a pandemic. But now that it's been a month since the pandemic happened, and now that we are in this national emergency for about a month, I feel like people are more familiar with this process, and they're more familiar of how to handle and cope with it. And right now we're just focusing on recovery and making sure that our supplies needs are met for the upcoming year.
What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? What's your day like, Danielle?
Well, we started off with about 2 people, but to this point we have about 6 members from my department here. And essentially we're doing the same thing as we do on our day-to-day. We're supplying all the departments that are activated during this emergency with supplies that they need. So N95 masks, surgical masks, hand sanitizers, disinfecting products, everything that is essential during this crisis, we're helping the city provide. We primarily like to tap into our resources that we have in our warehouse, in our main warehouse. If they don't have the products that we need at our warehouse, then we do go to our contract vendors.
just because we're in the middle of a pandemic doesn't necessarily mean that something else can't happen. It's like, there could be a fire, an earthquake, or something that is more typical of a Los Angeles scenario. Is there a plan to have both in place as this is going on?
Yeah, so one of the things we've been looking at within the last several years is coordinated, very complex attacks, from a terrorist being over a freeway shooting at people, an explosion in the downtown area. So we always look at multiple scenarios within one event. So for example, a couple of days ago we had the 3.3 earthquake, which sounds very minimal, but it was on a fault and a lot of people felt it. So that got people a little bit anxious. We are in very hot weather right now. We're expected some gusty winds, so fire threat is always with us, and so we understand that that's something we'd have to respond to. Now we know the center's open, so we feel we have that warm start we always like to have, but people are worn out and they've been here a long time, so how are they going to respond to dealing with a fire threat? Let's say that were to happen. One of our big things that we do here is opening up shelters, notifying the public. Are you in an evacuation area? Do we want you to get ready to go? Those kinds of things. So we definitely have that. We have what we call red cells, and that's folks that are the forward thinkers, our advanced planners. Like, for example, for the weekend, cooling centers is a big thing we do for the public if it gets to certain heat thresholds. So we're ready to pull the trigger on some cooling centers. They're not open right now, but we literally make that a phone call away where we can open up a cooling center. We would need a nursing component of that because we got to check folks' temperatures with COVID going on. So those are the kind of things that we do. We're not only looking at COVID, but we also have advanced planning components, which are looking at that fire, that earthquake. What are we going to do with mass care, communications, if all these things go down?
How do you make sure everybody gets information?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at is satellite communications, right? So we have a very robust satellite program. Every head of the city council and every council member has a satellite phone. The mayor, the chief of police, all these top-level officials, and we do monthly drills with them. We actually make them open up that phone and make a phone call. We do have backup generation capabilities in this building, so if the power were to go out, we have the capability to still transmit. We use the internet, social media. I mean, we're looking at every way to get the information out. Our thing is we have one message, but many messengers. We're looking at Nextdoor, Facebook, Instagram, all of those social media components, obviously traditional media. Technology moves so fast.
Right.
How do we keep up to it, and how do we leverage all that information?
When we're not in a pandemic situation and a crisis to this degree, what exactly does General Services do for the city of Los Angeles?
Like I mentioned, we supply anywhere from office supplies to furniture for the departments, traffic cones. We support our fleet department and all the other departments within the city to get them exactly all the physical items that they need to do their job on a day-to-day basis.
So when this is all calmed down somewhat and the storm has, rested a bit, what happens with you? What happens with your world?
So we still prepare for public health emergencies. So stuff that we may not think will be an issue, just like a mass pandemic. We never thought that this would be another issue since 100 years ago, but we got to prepare in case anything happens. One of the big plans that I focus on here is our medical countermeasures, our mass prophylaxis point of dispensing plan, which basically means that if we get hit with any anthrax attack, we have an emergency stockpile and we'll be able to help people out. We have to make sure to check that our stockpiles are okay, they're up to date and they're not expired, and we got to put more supplies in there if needed.
You understand how important it is, what it is that you are doing, correct?
I appreciate that, and I've been told that a few times, and I actually was called a first responder by somebody the other day, and that kind of touched my heart. I mean, we typically think of first responders as fire, police, nurses, and doctors and all that. So, I mean, just for people to understand that we are there to support the city as well, it really warms our heart as well.
Thank you for doing all of this wonderful work, because without people like you and without people in this room, it could be a lot worse. So congratulations and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for having us on and sharing the message out there with the Angelinos.
My pleasure.